Total Drama has been such a hit for me as a TV product, and I loved everything about it in terms of the comedy, gameplay, and production of it, where all that is in essence of giving us a plethora of seasons. But then it comes down to, how do I personally rank these seasons? What makes them distinct with each other? Well, I'm breaking down all of that in this video. What's up, guys? This is Willie and welcome to another video. And today's video is gonna be another season ranking, and I've chosen Total Drama because so what? But anyways, I will be ranking all the mainline Total Drama seasons, so there won't be the inclusion of Total Drama Rama because I never even bothered watching it, and it would probably end up being a bottom anyways. And I will unfortunately not include Redonkulous Race, even though it would have been interesting to put it on. It just doesn't fit with the overall premise of what Total Drama's game structure is, so I won't be including that. So I'm just going to be ranking all 8 seasons of the main series, and based on ranking how much I enjoyed the seasons throughout my experience of it. So let's get right into it. So at the bottom ranking, the worst season of the mainline Total Drama is one that at the time I was liking it more than most of the general fan base, and I didn't have it above one of the seasons later on the list. But unfortunately, as time goes on, I start recognizing, yeah, this season's just abysmal, and that is Total Drama All-Stars. Not a surprise, because everyone regards this as the worst, and although I initially did not mind it that much, as of now, yeah, I agree. This season was a disappointment, and that just not only just stems from the lackluster plot that leads to a bevy of inconsistencies, it also necessitated one of the biggest grouping of character derailments, because each character in this season that we have grown to watch develop themselves just go downhill in this one singular season, and it's just not one person, it's a dozen, and that alone just already tanks this season down, because quite frankly, who really got much development this season? And plus, this season's villain, who is Mal, is just up there as the worst, because it's not really on his own right, but mostly because everyone else was just totally watered down. That lessened his gravitas as the villainous role on the season. And considering this season is labeled as All-Stars, it's just underwhelming how it plays out, which I don't know what it is about seasons with the term All-Stars, where it taken into account into the real life situations where sometimes seasons named All-Stars just don't end up going well, where we have something like Survivor All-Stars, Australian Survivor All-Stars, BB22 All-Stars, like they were all bad seasons. And in line with Total Drama All-Stars being just as bad as them, embraces this All-Star curse where the excitement for it just dwindles because of how bad the season is. So that's my opinion on Total Drama All-Stars, and that's why I'm ranking at the bottom of this list. Now to rank 7, and guess what? It's unsurprisingly Total Drama Pakatu Island, where again, it's just another season that is just pretty bad. I mean, it does stem from its cast, who are just so tropey. They are not that interesting in terms of how much depth they have, where they all just come off as one-dimensional and not really breaking out of those molds. Where truth be told, the only sort of characters that I think fascinated me were someone like Sean and Jasmine, and maybe Sky to a degree, but everyone else is just blah. And it's a shame that this is kind of on par with All-Stars, where both seasons' casts were just written terribly. The difference is that All-Stars was coming in with returning players and actively ruined their reputation, while for this season, it's a fresh new cast, so we have no knowledge of who they are until they step foot in the game. And I guess that's somewhat a net positive here in the fact that even when their characters are ruined, it's not like we're going to care too much about it because it's a first-time player, so we don't get much development from them. But overall, outside the cast, the plot of the season is just a mess, where we had some very cheesy villains like Max and Scarlet to a degree, very bad. And then we have Sugar, who I guess they were trying to make like the header mold, but she's written in the worst possible way where we just don't even like her, and her gameplay is just suck butt. So it's not anything of note, and to be honest, this season is forgettable. Like, there's not really much big moment from this season that I can really say. For all be honest, it's kind of better than having a big moment in terms of a negative side, which is what All-Stars would be good at. But outside of that, there is not much else that I can really take away from this season. So I'm going to rank it here at number 7. Now ranking at number 6, this is a season that I was just mentioning in the All-Stars section, and I did have it below that season initially, but as time goes on, I've kind of grown from the season and softened on it. Not to a degree that I actually like it more than the next 2 seasons, so at this spot, I'm going to have Revenge of the Island. I know this might come to a total shock to you all that I'm put the season pretty low, but for me, I just don't really get myself connecting to it as much. Where it's a season that I don't prioritize on a rewatch on any given time I want to rewatch Total Drama, which speaks for itself. I don't mind a new cast, it's definitely adds more uniqueness to it that we're given a more nuanced sort of feeling to this season, that we are introduced to a fresh new look of characters who we see are going to develop themselves over the course of the season. I mean, let's get to my thoughts on this new generation of cast members. They're not bad. They're definitely above Pakatu Island because they bring a lot more to the table in terms of their personalities and how they're going to play the game. But also, the negative part of this cast is the fact that not much of them do we see ever again, where they do come off as forgettable for the most part, which is really disappointing because there's characters like B, there's like Dawn, there's like Anne Maria. Like the entire final 6 plus Sam would be the ones who were brought back, which I would always question why Sam over the likes of who I just mentioned. But let's get that out of the way. Let's just talk about the season itself. It's fine. I like what they did here with the plot of the season and how much they brought a lot of intrigue with some of his characters. Like Scott is a very fascinating villain who strives to play very chaotically and make innovative moves that are somewhat unheard of in terms of Total Drama strategies. And also, another thing that booms this season is some of the cameos from the previous generation, where it's cool to see a dynamic like this added into a second generation to test their waters. And although All Stars really emphasizes that more, mingling the two generations into one season, I do think this season does an excellent job giving us some noteworthy cameos from the old guys to at least give them something to do on this season, much more than being looked at as an afterthought. And the story of the season is just fine. The final two, though, was pretty interesting showdown between two different forces, where we have Cameron, who's the heroic side, who was such a somewhat underdog, coming from a disadvantage that we don't have, and then we have Lightning, who's more of the villainous force, coming from a more over-the-top persona, and will have such instincts to do what he thinks will propel his legacy. And it did intrigue me a lot in this final battle, and I'll be honest, the Cameron winning ending is way more preferable, as it really fulfills his story arc and his character development, and seeing how well loved he is from the cast, I think that's way more satisfying than a Lightning win. But for me, the reason I still will have this at number 6 is because the seasons above are ones I have less fatal flaws with than this season, and truth be told, at least I'm more interested in giving those seasons a rewatch than this one, which is why it knocks this one down quite a bit. So it lands on rank number 6 in this spot. Now to rank number 5, and now we got the first reboot season that I need to talk about, and come on, it's so obvious that it's going to be reboot season 2 because it's its flaws with its story is what really knocks it down for me. I mean, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed most aspects of this season way more than a lot of Revenge of the Island, and that is kind of greatly bolstered by its cast, where the reboot generation were some of the strongest cast of characters that we would ever get. And this would be the first season where an entire cast returned. Like, we never had that before, because back when we had the older seasons, it was only an abbreviated amount of people that returned to the following seasons, but this one had the entire cast from the previous season to return, so it was very interesting on that right, even though it could come off very repetitive. I will make a nitpick, like, why did we have to do Island again? Like, we could have just done like Total Drama Reboot Action. That would have been more interesting to relive how the old adventure of Total Drama went, but oh well. The first half of the season, the pre-merge, was definitely very interesting. I like the story of Julia and MK, and I guess Bowie in a way enforcing this cheat method so their team can win the next few challenges, much to Wayne and Raj's chagrin. And there wasn't as much losses in the pre-merge outside of maybe Scary Girl and Nichelle, because let's be real, I don't personally think it's right to have pre-merge players be pre-merge again. Like, they could have at least made it to the merge, but the writers decided no, they're just gonna be early boots again. How lovely. But that's not really the bad part. Obviously, I did just mention some of the inconsistent storyline, but it also doesn't help by the fact that the back half did kind of drag a bit for me, where I did not find myself as interested as I wish I could have been. I mean, we still had some really notable moments. I mean, Julia eventually getting her hands on Damien's idol and then eventually playing it at the Final Four, much to Priya's shock, was definitely a big moment. And yeah, and we cannot forget about Priya and Kayla's relationship, which is pretty hit or miss. I mean, I know a lot of the fan base were pretty annoyed by them. I'm just like so-so with it. I mean, it is something that is noteworthy from this season, especially the post-merge, much more than anything else I could say. And this season obviously culminates with a Wayne win. So he's the winner, I guess. I mean, nothing against Wayne, I think he's a solid player, but also, the writing of the season did not really write him to be as satisfying as a winner as I wish he could have, which does kind of harm how I view this season, but I still believe the flaws are not as greatly harmful in comparison to Revenge of the Island, so I'm gonna have it at this spot in ranked number 5. Now to the next season, and I know it's not a popular opinion to have this season this high, which I know the general fan base does not revere this season, and I agree in that light, but in comparison to the previous seasons, I just don't think they outmatched this season, and that is Total Drama Action, which, to be fair, I'm not a fan of this season as well, but just looking at the field that we have, it's not that bad, but it's still a season that is really flawed and does have some massive inconsistencies. It also doesn't help by the fact that it is widely bloated with non-elimination episodes that are only there to meet with the 26 episode constraint, considering we are only coming into this season with an abbreviated amount of players compared to the season before it. I mean, let's just get to the players. There's some who kind of derail while others do really grow and pop out more than what they did on Island. Like the likes of Justin and Beth to a degree get a lot more to do on this season than they did on Island. But then there's players like Trent, who just goes off the rails with his character and is kind of ruined when he plays the game all wrong. And then the likes of Heather, who unfortunately just is so shafted that there isn't really much she could do on this season. It's just used as fodder to create some kind of comedic sequence around her, basically because she's bald. But for some pros with this season, I do like the aesthetic there, where they decided to move away from the island, which is what Reboot Season 2 should have done, and brought a different sort of scenery and theme that brought a distinct vibe to the season as well. I already mentioned that there was a lot of heavy-handed filler with this season because of its myriad with non-elim episodes, which I don't care about them. I only care for the gameplay. But I'll say, the gameplay here was a lot more stronger than most of the other seasons that I can credit to. But it just doesn't help by the fact that the season doesn't come off very super remarkable in the modern day, where there's not really this big moment on the season that truly sticks out. And also, the final two is just kind of a weird one, where they're not really opposite force, even though Duncan can be looked as the villainous figure while Beth is the hero. And I'll be honest, their writing on the season didn't really reinforce them enough to be a very satisfying winner, but I still think they played somewhat decent games, with Beth probably playing the much more better game considering she was rarely targeted. So I can at least be satisfied with her gameplay to warrant her to win over Duncan, but it doesn't satisfy how her story was written that made her ending meet with the constraints. So yeah, Total Drama Action, I'll have it ranked at this spot at number 4. Now we jump to the top 3, which in my opinion are the greatest seasons of Total Drama. So at number 3, I'm just gonna have to go with the one that just doesn't reach that peak, unfortunately, and that is Reboot Season 1, which was very strong after the stretch of really bad Total Drama seasons that we have up until this season's release, and it gave such a breath of fresh air to finally get a solid Total Drama season, and for that to be all thanks to the wonderful cast that we got, which I think is one of the best generation of casting that we've had in Total Drama, which, I mean, to be fair, it's scripted, but these characters were written really well and weren't really tropey or lenient on some stereotypes that are just way too generic in the modern days. And it is all coherent with the distinct personalities that we got from the likes of like Julia, Bowie, Priya, Millie, pre-mergers like Scary Girl, MK, Nichelle, and the rest of the cast at least have something to bring to the table. And on top of that, the gameplay, they brought a lot more than any other cast of Total Drama in general, because I've been outspoken how the new era generation have been very game body, and this season really shows how much these players live up to this game body nature, embracing them in a really riveting way, which made the season very entertaining from a gameplay standpoint as well. But it doesn't come with its flaws because it's not that perfect, and certain times it felt like it was way too challenge focused, where we didn't get much strategy talk and some of the eliminations just felt so sudden without much proper context to them. And the bigger criticism is the fact that albeit this season is really good, most of what I can remember of this season just doesn't stick as much in comparison to the other seasons above this one, where I don't know what it is about modern shows, but sometimes I just don't think they really stick to your mind as much as time goes on. And unfortunately, this season just lands in that caliber. Don't get me wrong, it's not that forgettable either. I do think the Priya win, which, full disclosure, this is where the reboot seasons now start only having singular winners instead of the usual canon winners between the top two. So it does feel like the winner really matters the most on how they are written in terms of storyline, and I think Priya is the perfect winner to satisfy this season because her storyline was well established and felt right to conclude this season in a satisfying way, unlike Reboot Season 2. So those are my takeaways with Reboot Season 1, and that's why in my opinion I'm having it ranked at number 3. Now we got 2 more seasons left, and it was a debate for me for which one I was going to pick, where one of them is more nostalgic because it was the foundation for this spectacular franchise, while the other one is a lot more interesting and had a very compelling storyline that kept me engaged. So the debate here was very tough, but I decided screw it, let's just go for the latter option. So at ranking number 2, I'm just gonna have Total Drama Island, which fair, the argument can be to have this season number 1 because it was the start of this franchise and also it's more nostalgic. But in my opinion, I just think the season above this just does things better, and in many other aspects I'm going to talk about when I get to it. But for this season in particular, oh, it's good. It is very nostalgic, but it does have a lot of flaws, mostly because most of the cast just come off one-dimensional and rudimentary. Even some who just have no relevance to the season and are just there, like someone like Tyler and maybe Noah in a way, are just like whatever to the season. But I think what really carries this season is the foundation of Heather and her villainous role throughout the season and her eventual downfall at the end. It's what kept me engaged throughout because she's the kind of villainous player that is written correctly, with a lot of focus on her dynamics with other people, either negative or positive, really emphasizing on her role as the season's main villain. And yes, there are other great characters too, like there's Lashana, obviously, Lindsay is someone notable, Duncan, DJ, even a pre-merger like Courtney. Like, this first season does its best to set the standards of who these characters are, even though they are really one-dimensional. But the story of the season and the main plot just comes off very unhinged and really messy, where it just doesn't resonate with me as much, and I don't think certain aspects really fit well with the theme of the season, and especially with Heather being a villain. I feel like the people in Owen and Gwen who would eventually be the one to take down Heather don't really satisfy me as much in terms of their role really fitting into being Heather's adversary. I mean, Gwen is definitely fine enough in that role. It's really Owen who just doesn't really make sense as much. Like, if you really want to make it more sense, it could have been Lashana because she had an ongoing rivalry with Heather, and I think her being the one to ultimately take down Heather would have been much more fitting and satisfied the story of the season a bit better. But instead, they just had to write her off in such stupid fashion because I guess the writing has so much impetus on how they mismanaged some of the consistency and storylining with this season. And because of that, it does lower my opinion on this season. So this is why I have it ranked at number 2. Now number 1. Rank number 1 is obviously World Tour, which I know the original Total Drama Island should be number 1 because it is a lot more of a landmark, but I just think World Tour is written a lot better, reaches that peak for me and captures the full potential of what I want from a Total Drama season. A very well established storyline with a satisfying conclusion and some really dynamic gameplay that actually keeps me engaged, and this season truly embodied all of those facets, and that is what made me look at this season as the best. But obviously I can't just sit here and yap like this and that without full explanation, so let me break down why I like this season. It establishes this very riveting storyline between Al and Heather, being two villainous figures having this wild ascension but also clashing against each other throughout this game, which led to a lot of interesting gameplay along the way as well, and that's all thanks to their hands that really helped bring the essence of the dynamic nature of the season. Not to mention that the aesthetic of the season is really unique, where we're not really staying on one single location. We're going to several places because it's a tour around the world, so that it comes as different sort of sceneries that I do really like, giving a combination of amazing race feelings to this Survivor-like show. The musical aspect, although some of them did annoy me a bit, I did vibe with them hard because I love music. And on top of the whole nature of Heather and Alejandro as the main figureheads of the season, there's also a lot of character developments too, mostly on Heather's side of things, and that's wildly distinct from how usual Total Drama would just write these characters, just being as rudimentary as possible. But for this season in particular, they gave a lot more to develop a certain amount of characters, and Heather is one of those who I can truly emphasize on because she gets the most out of it too. And in terms of Final 2, this is the best that we can get because two radical different forces that adds to the intrigue of the season. And as always, I will say the most satisfying ending is for Heather to win because that's what I felt like the story was telling us all about, being the one to take down Alejandro after seeing through his villainous antics. And that really propels my opinion on this season quite a lot, thus making me look at it more highly than Island. But the season obviously cannot be said without its issues, and I know there's some annoying subplots like Sierra and Cody, which is like, Sierra, please stop it. And then we have this short-lived love triangle between Courtney, Duncan, and Gwen, which I know a lot of people don't like, and I found it kind of disappointing too. But was that enough to harm the season? Not really. But anyways, I think Total Drama World Tour captures everything that I would want from a season to make it truly iconic and stand out to me. So that's why I rank it as the best. With all of that, that's my mainline Total Drama season ranking. Hope you all enjoyed it, and you might as well comment down your personal opinion on how you would rank the seasons. Feel free to do that, and I'm going to continue covering Total Drama in the future because you all know that is one of my top 5 favorite cartoon shows, so there's a lot of personal attachment I have. Tap the like and subscribe if you want to tune in for more, but with that, I appreciate you all tuning in, and I'll see you all in the next video.